I'm sorry that I missed, this is Senate Judiciary Committee Thursday, April 21st. And, you know, I usually don't announce birthdays, but I think it's important to recognize that Queen Elizabeth is 96 today.
Today's your birthday.
She's the longest serving monarch in the history of the United Kingdom anyway. I don't know if in the world, but she certainly is served.
Yeah.
Over 70 years.
And she has done a great
So
job.
I think it's worth announcing anyway.
It is. So
I might do it on the
I was
floor.
going to say, maybe.
Oh, Allison will beat you to it for sure.
But I did want to do it here just to make clear that.
Yeah.
So we had that Queen, the Queen on Netflix, that show series of Queen. Have you ever watched
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I love it.
Great.
I didn't
That one
watch
is
it.
on
I
called
watched all of the ones.
Oh, it's
Now,
great.
the Netflix one on the Crown.
The Crown.
Oh,
Yes,
that's
the
what I meant.
Crown. It's
That's
called
what
the
I meant.
Crown.
Oh,
Sorry.
the Crown.
Is it good?
Is the film started?
No, not yet. We're waiting anxiously.
So what is it, a series?
Yeah, it's called The Crown. It's
Crown
very
is
good.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Very
Oh,
good.
Okay, we all recommend the Crown. And, with that, I apologize for having to miss yesterday's discussion on H 546. The racial justice statistics. But I thought we'd pick up there. And Eric, do you have a new draft, or are we still working with 2.1?
Well, this one is a bit new from yesterday based on the committee's discussion yesterday. So this is a revised proposed committee amendment, which the changes are highlighted again, still between the bill as it came over from the House and the proposed amendment. So we can look at all the changes for now, Senator Sears, just to sort of start from the beginning, or would you rather focus on just the pieces that are different between yesterday and today? Either way, it's totally fine. There aren't that many changes. It won't take that long. So you remember the discussion and pretty substantial difference between this draft and the one that you were looking at yesterday. You remember as the bill came over from the House, it established both the Division of Racial Justice Statistics and the Racial Justice Statistics Advisory Council to serve in an advisory oversight, policy discussion role with respect to the division. The draft you looked at yesterday made a structural proposed change to eliminate the advisory council and have RDAP, the Racial Disparities in Criminal and Juvenile Justice Panel, serve in the same role that the council would have served. So that was what was discussed yesterday. Then there was further discussion, witness testimony, and it was decided for this draft that you would reinstate the advisory council, so that would still be there with respect to having this advisory capacity, which is actually laid out expressly, specifically in the language for the division. The liaisons would be struck as the language on page 9 indicates. And then the advisory council would be required to report monthly to RDAP. So there would be an additional monthly sort of connection between RDAP and the council itself by virtue of that monthly report, as well as so there's that piece of it, and the fact that it's specifically laid out that the role of the advisory council, that's again on page 7, is to serve in this advisory capacity to the division. So it modifies the House bill in that respect, but is also a little bit more similar in the sense that the advisory council still exists. So it goes back to that piece. And then of course the RDAP is still there, having its role to take these reports from the division on a monthly basis, and also to be consulted. You'll see for various things that it was in the existing statute, for example, the articulation of who the entities are, what types of data the division is meant to collect, who the entities are that aren't provided. So the RDAP continues with that role. But otherwise, the council would be the one that served in the advisory capacity. So that I think is the main differences between yesterday's version and today.
And Senator, we did talk about this a little bit and in GovOps, and our intent was never to add more work to the RDAP or to upset them in any way. The intent was to make it an advisory council within the office as opposed to this external.
Okay.
So that was our intent, and so this does, it puts the advisory council with the same makeup in as advisory to the division of racial statistics in the Office of Racial Equity.
Right.
And it's the same makeup of the, and the report to, we suggested the report to RDAP, that RDAP wouldn't necessarily be responsible, but there needs to be the connection there between RDAP and the advisory council, a kind of an official connection there around the statistics. That's why we suggested that.
I'd like to hear from some of the folks that are in the room right now. Whoever wants to, Eitan, Rebecca, Susana, Flacco, and I see Dr. Joy is also on by phone. If any of you have any comments on this, I'd be happy to hear them right now. Rebecca?
Hello, I'll go
All
first.
right.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. For the record, Rebecca Turner from the Office of the Defender General, and also wearing dual hats here, the Defender General's designee on the RDAP panel, so a member. I can say right away that I'm pleased to hear and see. I just saw the most recent draft that made the changes. I too was alarmed by the draft yesterday, and just wanted to make sure that the committee also knew that what Eitan shared yesterday as the viewpoints of what he expected RDAPs would be as a group, but personally I wanted to also make sure the committee was aware that I thought that was a consistent recollection of our long-standing position that RDAP is absolutely not shy to step up to the table to do the heavy lifting. We have done considerable work. I can speak personally, but there are so many on this panel that have gone way beyond our regular 2 hours once a month in the many years that this has been in creation. So we appreciate that the legislature recognized that there was a need for RDAP, and I just want to share that the panel members, speaking from one of the original, part of the original members on the panel, that is full of very committed, passionate people from every sort, and I think that this bill reflects, and yesterday's suggestion certainly reflects appreciation for RDAP's work. And I also think that this latest change this morning, pulling back RDAP from having that central role, equally and actually more specifically recognizes the weight that RDAP provides to the legislature, because if it had stood as recommended yesterday, having RDAP being fundamental and integral to the success of this new data entity, we wouldn't have been able to meet those demands, let alone all of the other listed mandates in the enabling legislation of RDAP. So I think that this particular change reflects both a strong support that this new data entity just launch off with 100% full support that it will succeed, but also it implicitly supports RDAP and the work we're trying to do as we now turn our focus away from the data entity. As Mark Hughes said, it was painful to hear, but it was real. It takes us years to get to a final actionable report like the one we delivered last year, a Herculean effort of some on the subcommittee last summer, which I know you have heard about, where we worked many hours over the summer to produce just that report. We are now turning and focusing our energies on what next we think should be the top priorities within the enabling legislation. So I appreciate the opportunity that this version gives to RDAP to let us and free us up this summer to start in on these other projects that we've had to table. And I also, for what it's worth, I, as a member of RDAP, support this current draft. It certainly reflects the intent of RDAP's report to the legislature. It tracks with the House version. The Office of the Defender General supported, while we have long had our concerns about an independent entity and that the new data entity be deemed independent, and that the data that's produced, the analysis that's produced, can't be seen as politicized, right? Undermining the ultimate policy outcomes that we want the legislature to hopefully do and decide in response to this data. So we are trying to insulate and make sure that the data entity can be producing trustworthy, reliable results, not just for the government, but for the people in Vermont who can trust that these systems are both recognizing that there are racial disparities problems in these systems and serious about addressing and correcting them. So thank you for hearing the concerns yesterday and making this most recent change.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comments. We appreciate it. I, again, missed yesterday's, but I'm glad that we have something that might be acceptable to RDAP. Anyone else who would like to comment? Eitan?
Good morning. I realize I never do this. For the record, Eitan Nasreddin Longo, chair of the RDAP. Forgive me for always forgetting to say that. I spent a lot of time last night collecting commentary from the RDAP, but this commentary was based on an earlier version of this bill that we were looking at yesterday during the hearing. There's not much I can do but echo what Rebecca said. This is far more in line with what we were hoping. Aaron Jacobson, who is our representative from the Attorney General's office, points out that we have spent the last 3 meetings discussing in detail what we want to focus on next. And there's a lot to choose from. But one thing it seems we're all agreed on is that it's not data. We did data. And if we wanted to keep doing data, we would have recommended that to the legislature. We did not. Another member of the panel, and that would be Monica Weber, pointed out the new version. I had not yet seen it this morning. I was consumed, unfortunately, with some family duties with elderly family members. She feels that, this new version really does incorporate some of the changes that we discussed. And she feels that this is really going to allow us to, in a sense, keep data in front of us because it's never going to disappear, but it also allows us the freedom to continue work that is in our enabling statute. I mean, one of the things we are doing is really reviewing our responsibilities to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council and trying to figure out what we need to do to help them. So rather than waste your time, because I know you don't have any, I would just say that much of what I said to you yesterday was confirmed by members of the panel. There was sort of general dismay. And this morning, everyone has just seen the new version. And of course, everything goes so quickly, but the new version is far more in line with what we are hoping for and what we would really need, frankly, to continue to function as the RDAP, which you have come to want to be participating with you in doing these kinds of investigations. And I think that that probably is all I need to say.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Always appreciate your counsel and all your hard work. I'm not sure how much it gets recognized.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that very greatly. Thank you.
Well, anybody else who would like to comment?
Suzanne.
Huh?
Suzanne.
Malcom?
Good morning, and for the, unless Susana would like to speak first, happy to cede the
I
floor.
don't care.
No, please.
Okay, well, I will keep it pretty brief, but for the record, my name is Falco Schilling, and I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Vermont. So I also want to echo the comments that we heard from witnesses earlier this morning that we appreciate the reinstatement of the Advisory Council at the advice of the RDAP, and so just want to thank the committee for that change in response to the testimony that they heard yesterday. At the same time, we do have two concerns about this current draft. One is about a change that was made in this draft, and one is about a change that was not made in this draft. The first is a change on page 4, line 9, section C, which it relates to rulemaking to carry out the duties of the division. As you'll see in this draft, it changes the division's requirements from a permissive rulemaking to a mandatory rulemaking, saying the division shall adopt procedural substantive rules in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 25 of this title. Our concern with this is that by making this a requirement that the division produce rules before the data collection begins, that's going to create another unnecessary delay in the actual collection of this data. You know, at this point, we've had the RDAP release 3 different reports on what data we should be collecting. And this in itself creates another additional delay. As you know, this is to complete a full rulemaking. They're going to have to make sure the office is staffed and then engage in a rulemaking process, which can take at least 8 months and cost, a couple $1,000s. So we think this should be reverted to the House passed version and include the language may, because we understand there may be a need to pass procedural rules in the future, but would hope that the division could issue guidance and work collaboratively with the departments that they're seeking information from, unless an actual formal rulemaking is necessary. So that's a change that we would like to see that has been made in this current draft. And then the other change is one that I discussed in my testimony to the committee when I first testified on this bill, and then also briefly yesterday, which is around the requirements in Chapter 20 VSA 151 for law enforcement compliance with data reporting requirements. And we spoke very briefly, and I know that there was some misunderstanding about whether those requirements would actually also extend, and the consequences of non-reporting would extend to the requirements of this reporting to the division. And so my reading of that statute says that they were required to, it would be the inability to use the Criminal Justice Training Council's services or to send trainees to the police academy would only apply if there was a violation of the enumerated statutes in that section, or if they did not follow a requirement or adopt a policy under the chapter in which that requirement exists. So that'd be Chapter 151 of 20 VSA, whereas this requirement would fall under 3 VSA Chapter 68. So we're hoping to see a language change there to encompass this new data reporting requirement, either by expressly referencing it in that statute, or by creating a larger catch-all phrase within that statute saying, required to follow, enforce any policy required under statute. So those are two things that I just like to note, but I also greatly appreciate the committee's attentiveness to the testimony yesterday, and I will leave it there in case there's any more questions.
Senator White.
Yeah, Falco, thanks. I think that we had a discussion around shall and may in government operations, just as they did in the House, and we settled on shall, but I think we're okay with may. I mean, that we didn't have a strong opinion about that, and I thank you for doing the additional investigation into the stick and carrot issue, because we did talk about that because you brought it up in GovOps, and we were under the impression that it would be covered, but if it's unclear, we should make it clear.
And that's something I would defer to legislative council on in their opinion of that. But that was just my reading, so just wanted to flag that.
Falco, Eric would like to ask you a question or comment.
Yeah, could you either send me an email or point me right now to the specific language in Title 20 that you're reading to see whether it would encompass the division as we're sort of talking about?
Yeah, happy to shoot you an email, but it's Title 20 VSA Chapter 151, Section 2359.
Great, thank you.
And I will send that to you an email as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Susana? Thank you. Well,
good morning, Susana Davis, Racial Equity Director. I am very pleased that my colleagues are more pleased with this version of the draft. I do want to just point out one thing of concern for us, which is an issue that we had raised originally with prior drafts of this bill. And that is just the level of support that's going to be required from the agency of administration, specifically the change here that returns the advisory duties to the advisory council, and the advisory council being listed as having the administrative, legal, and technical support of the agency of administration. We did touch on this in earlier hearings about the division itself having that level of support from AOA and what that was going to mean for AOA, since our core staff is quite small. I think a lot of people don't realize how small AOA actually is. So in addition to the division leaning on AOA central staff, we now also have the council that's created within the Office of Racial Equity and also leaning on that central staff. And so I just want to make sure that we're all aware that is going to take a bit of an administrative toll, and specifically the legal component of this is important because AOA, unlike I think most other state agencies, does not have a general counsel's office. All of our legal matters are handled by the Attorney General's office. And so when we say that the division or the advisory council will have the legal support of AOA, really what we're saying is shall have the legal support of the AGO. And so I just want to make sure that this committee is aware that AGO needs to be aware of this and on board, because this is going to create additional workload for them as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could that be taken up in the appropriations committee? This bill has to go to appropriations. And could you work with Eric on language to make clear?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, was that question directed at me?
Yes. Could you work with Eric to make clear that you need the support of the Agency of Administration and the Attorney General's office?
I can.
And we can make that clear in the appropriation section. Which members of the committee are on appropriation? Senator Baruth.
Thank you, Susana. I'm wondering if I understood you correctly. Are you saying that the Agency of Administration might need more resources if we do this, not just a directive?
I'm saying that the answer is possibly yes, and that in future reports from this division, I believe there's another provision in this bill that says that annually or next year, the division is going to report to the committee on any additional resources or changes to the resources that are needed. I'm saying that you all should be prepared for the possibility that we may come to you and say, whoa, this is too much, we need to supplement.
Got it, thank you.
So, Susana, that's interesting about the legal there, because we just ran into that in another committee, and I wonder if that's standard language when we put something in the administrative support will come from an agency, because we just ran into that with ADS around having legal support from ADS for a particular commission, advisory council, and they don't have legal either. So we added the AG to the committee so that there would be, but this committee is a little bit different. But I wonder if that's just kind of standard language when we put in support.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Senator. That is completely just standard boilerplate language. And so I wouldn't ask that the committee change it, but I just want to make sure that we know the trickle down effect for AOA in particular, when we say it for AOA, where there is that ancillary factor. But I do agree with you. It's pretty standard, and I wouldn't suggest changing it, just that we keep that in mind for AOA.
Yep. Thanks.
Sounds. I'm not sure we need an amendment to that, but we do need a recognition.
Yeah.
But if you feel you do need an amendment, or you would like to work on the appropriations, I'm happy to work with you on that when it gets between now and when the bill gets to the Senate Appropriations Committee. And also, if the appropriations you think are enough. Not that we've got a lot of money left, but.
Yeah, there is that.
The House version of the bill has 363,000 to, oh no, excuse me. Yeah, 363,000 for the Office of Racial Justice Statistics, Office of Racial Equity for the Racial Justice Statistics, and 20,000 for digital services, and $3,360 for the per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses for the council. We'll be looking at that.
Yes, I mean, you know, I am just remembering the earlier conversations. You know, it has been a necessity for us to lean on data experts early on in this conversation to understand the kind of undertaking this was and what was going to be needed. And so between data experts who consulted with the RDAP and those who work in-house in the state of Vermont and ADS, it became clear that the level of staffing that we needed was closer to the number originally proposed. The number we're working with right now is reduced. So what I would say in response to your comment, Senator, Mr. Chair, is that if in fact we do identify any shortcomings in that appropriation, it will likely be in the staffing level more than anything. But again, that is a point on which I really defer to those in the room who are familiar with what it takes to do the data architecture and the infrastructure that's needed.
Okay. Questions, comments? I see Dr. Joy has her hand up, but she's by phone, so we won't be able to see her.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me today?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in response to Director Davis's last point on the lift that this is going to take, it is a big lift. As I spoke last week, we've been working with the National Criminal Justice Reform Project and are working out a charter that will be kind of a warm handoff to this office when it gets funded. And this will be the beginning of what it takes to build a analytical database from which the office can answer the questions that you're going to pose, that the RDAP is going to pose, that the council, most importantly, is going to pose. So in the original report, we kind of outlined what the skill set was that people were going to need. And I think that, and other people can refresh my recollection, I think that there was a staggered approach in the appropriation to get the office up and hiring, but I suspect that it is a lot of work that's going to be done. We are in the process now of mapping out the specific data fields from Valcor to the courts, and you know how it's a lot of work. So, you know, I would defer to our report on what the appropriate staffing is, and know that this may need more staffing and more appropriation at some point, because it's important work and it can't you know, as people have spoken to about data integrity and you want to make sure that you're getting what you want. And so, probably not making myself very clear. We stand by our original assessment in the reports about what the staffing needs of the office were going to be. And that was done by ourselves and with WICHE R2 and with some input from UVM. That's all I had to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Great. Committee, where do we want to go? This draft,
It sounds like this draft is pretty acceptable, and I do understand the issue of potentially needing more staff, but I would guess that would either come in budget adjustment next year or in the new budget, because when they get a better handle on exactly.
most likely it would be a budget adjustment.
Yeah.
I think as we see what the challenges are, I mean, any budget is the best guess
Right.
of what will be needed. That's why we have that's why we have budget adjustments.
Right.
Iron out, sometimes we give agencies more money than they need, sometimes we give them less.
Well, I would move that we amend 546 with draft 2.1. I don't think there were any, we were gonna look at the stick.
So, well, no, we were also gonna
And the
change
shall.
the shall to a may,
Got it, forgot that, yes,
occurring with the house.
yeah,
And we were gonna look at the stick.
the stick, yes.
So,
Put it mildly, I have no idea. I never loved carrots, quite frankly, so I'm not sure that there are real.
There really are no carrots in here.
It should be, sticks and something else.
Turnips.
Turnips, yeah. No, who likes turnips?
I think it's because of mules. I think you gave the mules the carrot or the stick or horses.
Probably
Uh-huh.
sticks and raspberries.
I was gonna say chocolate, that works for
Yeah,
better.
Okay, so but we do need to get the language
Yes, and I have
around
a
it.
question about that.
Yeah.
So the language, I think, is gonna be pretty easy to do, and I would recommend adding a new section to this chapter rather than trying to just tweak or cross-reference the existing section. Part of the partial reason for that is because the way it's written in Title 20, there's a specific date on or after January 1st, 2022. A law enforcement agency shall be prohibited from having its law enforcement applicants or officers trained by the academy or from otherwise using the services of the council if the agency is not in compliance with, and then it was a couple of things. So we could always say change that language, not in compliance with, say something like the data report or the data, it's the requirement that they provide the data when requested by the division. So we phrase that somehow. But the question I have is the date. Do you want to give, because it's going to take some time for this division, they have to hire their staff, but that's going to take a while. Do you want to look at some date the way they did in this Title 20 section and say, after such and such a date, someone that doesn't provide the data, maybe, I don't know, July 1st of next year, January 1st of next year? I'm just tossing it out.
January 1st of next year would be a good start date.
I don't feel strongly about that. I mean, you could just leave it January 22 because there's no requirement for providing the data now, so it wouldn't take effect anyway, so it's still after January 22.
But that would give them no time, like as soon as that means it would be in effect as soon as they'd essentially be not in compliance, as soon as the minute after they received it.
If you say the required data, but they haven't defined the required data yet, or the agencies, so it doesn't make any difference to me what is clearest, but. Put it out farther.
Why don't we work on that amendment as a separate amendment before it goes to the floor? If Falco, you and I could work, or you and Senator White could work on it.
Sure.
Between now and the time it goes to the floor, since it's going to appropriations, gives us at least this
Okay.
weekend and
Okay,
sometime next week to look at what we want to do, and then we can do that as a floor amendment.
Okay.
so could I ask maybe, Dr. Nazarene Longo if, oh, no, you won't be doing this. Susanna, do we have a sense of when the timing is that they would be required to, I mean, if we put a date in there for, that they can't use the services of the academy. If we put, January of 23, is that too early or too late? Does that make sense what I'm asking you?
Yes.
I mean, we're gonna be requiring them to, and you're going to, the agencies and departments and local entities are gonna be identified. And once they're identified and the data, what's required is clear, then they're gonna be required to do this, or they can't use the services of the academy. But what's a reasonable date for that?
As much as I hate to say it, I do think that January 23 might be too early.
Okay,
While I'm extremely eager to get this underway and to ensure that the agencies around the state are complying, I don't want to set them or us up for anything unexpected.
so maybe July
As I
of
said, I
23.
think, why don't we go with July 1st of 23? Which gives us all a year. And if you all think there should be a different date, let us know before the bill gets to the Senate floor after or during the time it's in appropriations. We can either change that date in there because it does have to do with appropriations, because if the law enforcement can't use the training council, they're not getting state appropriations. So I can make it look like that. So I think as long as we get everybody in agreement in the next 3-4 days, there's no reason to hold this bill up for that, as we all agreed to put something in from the floor or in appropriations or whatever.
So I just wanted to say, I think that date would be acceptable if you wanted to put it into the bill at this point in the current draft. And I'll also just note in subsection B, it allows the council to adopt procedures around the enforcement requirements and can give these agencies possible waivers if they need more time or things along those lines. So the council does have the ability to make sure that there's a compliance plan and to give waivers as necessary if they would be asked on get data on a reasonable timeline. So if the committee is all right with July 23, we'd be supportive of that as well.
I think what we're going to do is prepare an amendment that will be offered by the committee, the Judiciary Committee, when it gets to the floor, simply because I don't want to hold, given our timeline here, I don't want to hold the bill up to wait until tomorrow or something to vote it out. I'd rather give Eric time to draft the amendment, work with you and Rosanna on the amendment, what it looks like.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody's in agreement.
So with that,
Yep.
may I propose, move that we accept draft 3.1, which will change shall to may, that we amend H 546 with draft 3.1.
Okay.
Is that, did I get the 3.1 right?
You did, exactly.
Well,
Well done,
Michelle
Senator.
explained it to us yesterday. It was like 20 years for me to figure that out.
Got it, 100%.
That means you have to run again now. Figure that out.
It does not mean that.
All right.
Once you figure that out, it's all over.
Yeah.
Okay, Peggy, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Peggy, would you please call the roll?
Senator Benny,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Brewer,
Yes,
Senator Sears,
Yes, as long as Senator White supports the bill.
Now I would move that we approve, report favorably H 546 as amended.
Okay. Peggy, any further discussion? Peggy, I see a hand up from Senator Baruch, or is that just?
Nope.
No, that's the little,
Scratching his ear.
Oh, that's
It's
just
just
a little emoji
that's,
over your head
I think that looks like
that you
North-
probably can't see.
Shield.
Norton Security Line.
Oh, it's an issue. You were secure. Senator, Peggy, could you please call the roll?
Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Nika. Yes. Senator Wade.
Yes.
Senator Baruch,
Yes,
Senator Sears.
Yes, 500. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator White will report the bill.
I will. Thank you.
And you'll send it to me, Eric, from.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Will do.
Okay,
And then he's gonna send it to you and then you will give me a copy and I take it upstairs.
okay, great work.
Perfect.
So Ben can be available at 10:45.
Wiz,
Ben for the next.
great.
So if you want to break now.
So why don't we take a break now and come back at 10:45?
Okay.